Going.
Okay. The Board of Port Wardens, January the 26th, will now come to order. I'm Gene Godley, the chair. We have with us Willie Sampson, the vice chair, John Butler, Scott Anderson, Robert Shapiro, members of the board. We also have with us Carrie Berger, Kevin Scott, Sally Nash with the city. And unfortunately, Tammy Hook has a family emergency and can't be here. So we hope all is well with her. First item of business, we have an agenda before you. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Butler, Mr. Shapiro, second. All in favor, aye. Aye. The agenda is approved. The first item of business is election of officers. We need a chair and a vice chair. Is there anyone that would like to volunteer to be the chair? Do I have any motions?
I move to have Gene Godley continue as chair.
I have a nomination for me to be chair. All in favor? Oh, it wasn't seconded. Is there a second? Okay, Scott seconds. All in favor, aye. Aye. Okay, it will become, I will be the chair for the next year. We need a vice chair. Any nominations? I nominate Willie to be a vice chair. All in favor? Oh, second, aye. All in favor, aye.
Second, aye.
Will be the vice chair. So we'll continue as we are. And Robert, I want to just tell you how much we appreciate having you on the board. So we have a full board of Port Wardens and we need your input. The next item of business is we have two minutes, one from December the 24th and one from December the 7th. Is there anyone that has any comment on those? If not, I'll take a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll move to approve them.
It moved, second. And seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, those minutes are approved. I say all in favor say, and people are raising their hands, and that's fine. I'll try to enumerate what I see as seconds. The next item of business is findings of fact. The first one is the Lewis West Marshall Trust, Marital Trust, I'm sorry. And that particular application I reviewed and I had no problems, but John, you were the expert on lateral lines and led the questioning. I want to be sure you're comfortable with those findings. John?
You know, I need to double check something there. Hang on.
Okay. And John, if there's anything that makes you uncomfortable, we can approve those findings at the next meeting. I just wanted to be sure. I would have called you beforehand, but I didn't want an ex parte communication.
Well, I remember looking at it, but now I can't. I just wanted to double check. Sorry.
I tell you, why don't we just put that on pause and move to the next two findings, the Eckel and Edgewood. I've reviewed them and have no concerns, except in both of them, there is a grammatical error on page 2 where it says there were no additional written public testimony. It should be there was no additional public testimony. So with that correction in both of those, I move the approval of those two findings. Do I have a second for those two findings? John seconds. All in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous approval of those findings. And John, we'll just keep that on pause until you have a full chance to.
Just
Good.
just to chime in real quick, you do have 60 days after the closure of the public, or after the findings of fact, to approve the written findings. And I think we're probably at that 60-day mark since we didn't have a meeting in December.
Okay, and John just indicated that he was okay with those findings.
Okay.
So I move the approval of the findings, and I have a second from John. Correct? Yeah, okay, I have a second from John. So all in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Aye, they're unanimously approved. Okay, so the findings of fact are approved. And Kevin, I will,
You've got one more set for the Newman Street. For the December 7th.
sorry, yeah. Okay, we're moving to item number 5. There are also findings of fact on the Newman Street following our special meeting. And I have no problem with those. Does anyone have any concern? If not, I move their approval. I've moved. Do I have a second? John seconds. All in favor, aye. It's unanimous. Those were all approved. Okay, we now move to old business. And this is the Perham application, which as a courtesy to a public official, we delayed our vote on this application. It's now been 60 days, and I understand the attorney for the applicant is here, Mr. Shaler. Let me say for the record that this record was closed at the last meeting. There's been a couple of additional comments, but I can't admit those into the record because that record was closed. So I now recognize Mr. Shaler. Do you have any comment on this application, since you're the attorney for the applicant?
Hello? Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes. And if you're going to speak, I would like to swear you in that you will tell the truth to the court wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury.
I do.
Wait, now I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes. Did you hear
Okay.
me swear you in?
I did, Mr. Chairman. It was just a glitch there in cyberspace. Good
Okay.
evening, board members. Charles Shaler, Baker Donaldson on behalf of Jerry Perham. This matter was continued from November 24th at the request of Alderman Arnett, as you may recall. And so we are here today. And that request, as you will recall, Mr. Arnett, Alderman Arnett was going to task the city with conducting a dialogue with Mr. Perham, as well as take on some additional tasks. Sally Nash and I have spoken briefly on this matter. Mr. Perham certainly believes he's satisfied the criteria, but as you heard at the end of the last hearing, we're certainly willing to continue any dialogue the city wants to have on his application as its status quo. This is the middle of winter. The floating pier isn't going anywhere, as Mr. Chairman, you pointed out. And as a courtesy, you continued it to tonight. We certainly, again, believe we've met 1516030C in the criteria. Nobody has put forth any evidence that identifies any violation that wouldn't have the criteria met. The issue centers on public access, which is beyond the scope of the port wardens. That having been said, I believe Ms. Nash has requested a postponement or a continuance. And Mr. Chairman, we will simply defer to the board as to how it wants to proceed based on Ms. Nash's request, and I'll let her speak for the city. We have no objection, but again, defer to the Board of Port Wardens on the matter.
Mr. Shaler, do I interpret that as meaning the applicant is not or is requesting a continuance?
Mr. Chairman, we did not request the continuance, and I apologize for this email.
As of right now, are you requesting a continuance? Or are you requesting us to vote on this application?
Mr. Chairman, it's well put. Ms. Nash would like a continuance. We have no objection to the board continuing it if that's what the board feels is appropriate, considering status quo will be maintained.
It was continued without prejudice, absolutely, the first time. So
Correct.
I will recognize Ms. Nash, Dr. Nash, I'm sorry. And again, I find this very unusual for a party not a party at interest to ask for a continuance. But Dr. Nash, would you like to address the board?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for considering my request. As Mr. Shaler mentioned, we have had some good discussions. I'd like just a little bit more time to continue to talk to him. We had a few things that delayed us. We were waiting on a survey and some other information. And I'm still waiting on a little bit of additional information from our Director of Public Works, because as you know, that big outfall is there. And we just respectfully ask for a little bit more time to look at the application.
Ms. Nash, you above all, as a public official who's sworn to uphold the law and the regulations, can you tell me upon what authority the port wardens have to continue this? We have nothing to say. I mean, we have personal opinions about public access, but unfortunately, the law doesn't say that we can bring in our personal opinions into making decisions. So just tell me upon what authority we would have to continue this again.
Well, surely you'd want to ensure the safety of whatever you improve. And if there is an issue with that outfall there, which hadn't really occurred to us before, because it just didn't get enough attention until we realized that could be an issue. So, you know, wouldn't want to improve
I'm
something.
sorry to interrupt, Ms. Nash, but the record is closed on this, and there's no testimony on the danger of the outfall to this application.
Okay, well, I would defer to your legal counsel if you have discretion as chair to defer.
I will consult with Ms. Berger now. Do we have upon what authority do we have to continue this?
Well, I mean, under the rules and procedures, you can, if you determine that there's good cause for an extension of time, you can delay the decision to vote on an application. It is in your discretion, though. So I can't say that there's any binding legal authority that you have to delay it or that you have to postpone it. And the code doesn't allow for any member of the port wardens or the port wardens as a whole to weigh in on a public access issue.
So, Ms. Nash, let me go back to you and ask, since the record shows nothing having to do with outfall, what does it matter in terms of your negotiations with the applicant, whether this application is approved or not approved? Can't you just continue those negotiations no matter what? What does our approval have to do with public access?
Your approval, well, it depends on if you accept our condition of approval, which was to ensure that there was still room for public access despite the floating pier being in the exact location it is now, or if it needs to be moved to a slightly different location to enable our condition. But otherwise, we can still continue to negotiate, but I'd like to have it all part and parcel to the same application.
But under the law that we're following, the city code, there's nothing that mentions that we could condition this upon public access. I mean, it's safety, navigation, environmental. So, I mean, I'm just struggling with, why don't we just approve it and you can continue your negotiations or disapprove it, whatever we want to do. So I'm just torn myself about exceeding my authority or our authority as a board based on the city code.
Right. Well, I mean, there is sections of 15 that speak to blocking access, is there not?
No,
Gene, I have a question.
please, please,
Can I,
please, any port wardens can wade in. I don't want to monopolize this.
I don't remember the wording. So I agree, we don't address public access as any special thing, but there is already public access there. And I know there's been differences of opinion about what that means. But there's also been testimony that the floating dock does obstruct access to the water from the public access. And so I have, I'm undecided. I'm not really ready to approve this yet. And I for one, would prefer to see some continue. I mean, in my opinion, there are waterway issues here with the floating dock where it is. And I'm not prepared as a port warden to make a decision about the public access, but we do know we've been presented to us that there is a right of way there that's public access. And I just, it would be easier for me to approve if the city and the applicant could move forward and come up with something that works for everybody.
Well, I agree. If everyone's in agreement, it's much easier for me to say yes when people are in agreement. Any other comments from any fellow port wardens? Any other comment from?
I agree with John from the limited amount I know. I mean, don't we have an obligation to the public access as if it was private access and we were interfering, or that applicant is interfering with that? So, I mean, I realize we don't enforce what is defined as public access, but it looks like the city's trying to determine if public access is actually an issue here.
Why do we even mention it?
I'm sorry, what?
Well, if we're not allowed to make a ruling, why would we do that? About public access.
I would say it's not so much about the public access, it's about is the structure there interfering with navigable waterways?
Okay.
It has less to do with whether the public has the right to have access there. There is a public easement there. It has a question of, is that going to block someone else's navigation?
Yeah, and the record is set and closed on that issue. And we did have testimony both ways on that. Having delayed this for 60 days for the city to work on it, but out of courtesy to the city, since the applicant, hasn't objected to a continuance, I'm more than happy to accommodate, John and Robert on their concerns that we hear everyone out. I'm still a little torn with the record being closed as to what we would do, but I just want to serve notice that if there's not an agreement that the applicant comes forward and asks us to consider at the next meeting, I will move approval. So with that, I make a motion, we delay this and put it on the agenda for the next month without prejudice.
I'll second that.
Been moved and second. All in favor, aye? Okay. We now move to new business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Board members.
New business, the first one is Stephen Roth and Caroline Blakely. And I guess, Eric, they have to be admitted and then I'll swear them in. The alternative is to swear everyone in at one time, but I think by the time we admit them and then let them go, then we can just do this quicker, one at a time.
Okay, they should be coming in now. We're here.
Mr. Roth, are you going to present this application or is Mr. Marsh?
Mr. Marsh.
Okay. Waiting to see him.
He was, I hope he's there. He's the one that applied for us.
Yeah, we're having a little problem admitting people right now, so be patient.
We're good. Okay. I think that's him.
Hello,
All right.
it's Mike.
Mr. Marsh and Stephen Roth, Caroline Blakely, do you swear to tell the truth to the port wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
We do?
I do.
Okay.
Hi. Yes, sir.
Let me say at the outset of this application, we have 6 applications, and in each of them, and this is for the purpose of the record, the application will be admitted into the record, and the staff report will be admitted into the record. So with that, Mr. Marsh, can you briefly outline the application, what you're trying to do?
Yes, this application is for Stephen Roth and Caroline Blakely at 141 Spa View Avenue in Annapolis. We are proposing
Mr. Marsh, we're having sound problems.
12 feet landward. At that, we want to add a WC to install a 10-foot by 14-foot kayak float at 60 feet channelward of mean high water.
I had one question, Mr. Marsh, and that
Yes.
is, in all of the drawings, I see no measurement of the distance between the outermost part of the pier and the harbor line. Mr. Marsh, we're having sound problems. Hold up your hand and count out how many feet it is.
The visual's gone too.
Yeah, he's locked
I'm
out.
sorry to break.
Yep.
Hello. I'm back.
Okay, Mr. Marsh, my question was, how far is it from the outermost part of the pier to the harbor line?
That is roughly about 4.5 to 5 feet. According to the drawing.
The applicant realizes with that small distance that you cannot have a boat or tie up a boat at the end of the pier that will overlap the harbor line.
Yes, sir. That's why we're moving that furthest out pole 10 feet inward, so that the boat and the lift and all are well within the end of the pier.
Okay, I have no other questions. Other port wardens have any questions of this applicant? If there are no further questions, I move approval of the application.
I'll second that motion.
Been moved, seconded by Ms. Anderson. All in favor, aye.
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 Can you move for approval or do you have to keep it open for public hearing for the next meeting because it's new business?
Oh,
Carrie's correct in that, Gene. And I can also tell you, so far, we haven't gotten any public comments on this or any of the, just so you know, any of these 6 new business items, we've gotten no public comments to date.
Carrie, well spoken. I misspoke. What I meant was, I move that we close the record on this application and consider the approval at the next meeting. That was my motion. I think it was now seconded. All in favor? Aye. Okay,
Aye.
we'll consider this at the next meeting. I apologize to the applicant. I'm used to moving faster than Zoom will allow me to move.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Next application is Michael and Melanie Urbanski. Fellow Port Wardens, I know you can hear me. Don't let me move too fast. If you have, please raise your hand if you.
Gene, do we close the record? If I thought the next 30 days was to still more comments. Is that right or not right?
We close the record, I'm sorry, we close the record for public testimony, although we will accept written records until the next meeting. And that will be true of all 6 of these applications. Meaning there'll be no more public testimony, but we will accept written testimony.
They should be in the meeting now.
Okay. Doug Musser, I guess you're going to present this application and the applicant is not here. So
I guess I'm going to be the lead horse this evening.
well, I'd like to swear you in. You tell the truth, swear to tell the truth of Port Wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury.
I do.
Thank you very much.
I also see my client, Michael and Melanie Urbanski should be joining us, it looks like.
Well, assuming they're not going to speak and you're going to speak for them, why don't you go ahead and present the application?
Well, I will testify to begin with that the signs were posted in a timely manner on, let me tell you, Saturday, January 16th, we posted the signs as well as mailed out the public notices. The Urbanskis are basically proposing to do a maintenance project on their property. They wish to replenish the existing stone revetment that's in front of their existing wooden bulkhead. It would be a 70-foot long stone revetment, which would be replenished back to 10 feet wide by a 5-foot height, which is the maximum allowed by the MDE and Army Corps of Engineers. All work will be done by water access.
I have no questions, but as the house grammarian on your site plan, you might check out the spelling of Chesapeake.
Yeah, I apologize with that. I've got some new CAD operators in the mix.
That's okay. Those things.
And I will note also that they have misspelled Miss Urbanski's last name. So I apologize to Miss Urbanski in front of everybody.
Okay. Any questions from my fellow Port Wardens? This seems
No.
fairly straightforward. So I would like to do I have a motion on this?
I move to approve.
Mr. Butler moves to approve. Mr. Shapiro seconds. All in favor, aye.
Aye. Pending,
Oh, we're not moving to approve. That's right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
pending public,
I got to stop that. Thank you very much, Mr. Musser. We will now close the record on written record. I'm sorry, we'll close the record for public testimony and we will accept written testimony up until the next meeting where we will consider whether to approve or not to approve this application.
And I'd just like to let everybody know that, of course, we're in for our state and federal permit applications as well.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I
Thank you all.
apologize for my awkwardness in dealing with Zoom meetings.
Nope, they're fine. Take care, gentlemen.
Thank you. Next application is Yacht Haven of Annapolis. And I guess this is going to be Dan Lyrian.
Good evening, Port Wardens. I'm Dan Lyrian.
Dan, is
You want to swear me in first, Gene?
Mr. Blackwell going to appear?
No, sir.
Okay, so you're the only witness. So you have the next two applications. You swear to tell the truth with Port Wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Very well. Can you please summarize Yacht Haven?
I'm Dan Larian, representing Clarence Blackwell at Yacht Haven of Annapolis LLC at 326 First Street in Annapolis. The public notice signs were posted Friday the 15th, and the mail was placed and postmarked on the 15th. So proper notice was given and signs were posted. The intent of this is to maintenance dredge the existing travel lift well to -9, 105 cubic yards, and the inside corner of the bulkhead, the slips that are furthest up next to the galley, we're going to dredge 3 slips there, which will be 87 cubic yards to -7. The dredge spool will be placed on a barge towed to Smith Brothers Yard, loaded in a truck, and then taken to R.B. Baker and Sons to dispose of it. We have filed permits to MDE, and we have got comments back that they have received them, and they've assigned a tracking number for the Army Corps of Engineers and Maryland Department of Environment. So they're tracking along at the same time we filed the city permit.
Any comments or questions from my fellow Port Wardens? Dan, I take it that second dredging is filled in because of the outfall?
Yeah, and I think the way those inside corners are, they have a tendency to collect dirt because it's got a 90-degree corner where it breaks.
Yeah. If there are no further questions, I hereby close the record on public testimony, and we will keep the record open for written testimony until the Port Wardens meeting next. Did I hear you say something, Carrie? No,
Nope,
okay.
I didn't say anything.
Okay. We will then move to the next application, the Birkinshaw of 115 Spa View. Dan?
I'm Dan Larian again, representing the second application for Edwin and Georgianne Birkinshaw at 115 Spa View Avenue in Annapolis. The intent of this, well, we posted public notice signs and we postmarked, the mail went out on the 15th, Friday the 15th. The intent of this is to maintenance dredge an existing slip that we had dredged about 6 years ago, 50 cubic yards to -6. The existing stone sill that we installed 15 or 20 years ago, because of global warming, we're going to raise the elevation of the stone about 1 foot and cap it off and add 10 cubic yards of sand on the inside of that. There's an existing personal watercraft lift on the left-hand side of the pier. We're going to move to the right-hand side of the pier just because he's concerned about his sailboat hitting it in the location where he docks his sailboat at this time. And that's, again, the dredge spool will be placed on a barge, towed to Smith Brothers Yard in Galesville on the West River and loaded in trucks and hauled to R.B. Baker and Son in Queenstown, Maryland.
Then I'll have one question. I was a little, on drawing 5, you've got A, B, C, D, and I have no idea what those refer to.
Okay.
It's
So A, B, C, and D. So we take a cross section through that area and we show that on the preceding pages on sheet 6. You'll notice the contours of -6, and you'll see as we get closer to shore, the water depth gets shallower and the cut gets a little bit deeper. So it starts out, to be about 1 foot cut, and then it gets to be about 2 feet as we get in closer to shore at section B.
Okay, so all right, I didn't cross those two. Any questions or comments from my fellow Port Wardens?
I have a question, Mr. Larian. You mentioned about moving a boat, personal watercraft boat lift. I'm trying to see on the diagrams where that is.
Yeah, so if you look at sheet 5, there's an existing personal watercraft lift on the right, and it would say reset it on the, well, I guess if you're facing on shore looking at it, would be on the left side. So it's in the area where we're going to dredge. So when the boat overshoots the slip, they could hit that personal watercraft list. So we're going to move it to the other side of the pier, kind of mirror image it in the same location, just to get clearance so we don't hit it with the boat.
It's written in by hand.
Yeah, it was an
I see it now.
afterthought after we,
Right.
right at last minute when we were ready to file, the owner asked to add that, unfortunately.
So because it's being moved over there, the lateral lines aren't drawn in here. I know we're not approving this today anyway. I mean, it may very well be within the lateral lines, but
Yep.
maybe for the next meeting, you can
I'll get
show
those
us
to you.
how the lateral line is constructed there. And
Yeah,
you
we
know
will
how to
do
do
that.
that. I know you've done that very well in the past. So.
Yeah, well, we got that lift on the end, and that lift is 13 feet wide. This lift will only be about 5 feet wide, but we'll make sure you have an understanding of what that is, and I'll email that to Kevin.
Thank you.
Dan, on Google Earth, it looks like there's a kayak floating dock on that left-hand side. Well, I'm sorry, facing from the land, it's the right-hand side.
Yeah, I think he has that there. So when he waxes the boat, he runs it around the perimeter and stands on that to wax the boat, but it's not a permanent structure. It's more of a thing that gets staged there to do maintenance on the boat.
Okay.
So it'll most likely leave sooner or later, I'm assuming.
You said a kayak, Robert?
Well, no, I don't see a kayak on it. It's one of those sort of, I'm guessing the diameter, but it's, 4 or 5 feet deep and roughly, 11 feet wide. But it would be exactly where I believe, Dan, you let me know that
Yeah, it's
dinghy
got to come out of there. Yeah, it's in the way of placing that personal watercraft lift in, so it's going to leave.
Okay.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Given the fact there's no other public testimony, I hereby close the record of public testimony. We'll accept written testimony until next month when we will consider whether to approve this application or not. So Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now move to the 5th application, John Courtney. And I think Frank Biba will be the consultant on this. Frank, you're on mute. Frank, can you unmute your sound? Mr. Biba.
Okay.
Hi, hey. Is your client going to appear or are you making this presentation?
No, I believe he is not going to be here.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth to the Port Wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you very much. And welcome. You've seen a couple of these hearings before in your life, I think.
A few.
So can you present the application, Mr. Courtney?
Okay, it's the property is 7051 Bayfront Drive, owned by Dr. John Courtney. He has an existing 50-foot by 6-foot wide pier, wants to extend it to 75 feet with a 200 square foot L head at the end, and add a 10,000-pound boat lift with a access with a 3-foot by 20-foot finger pier.
I didn't see the harbor lines on the drawing. I assume they're too far out.
Well, it's a good question because the harbor lines were drawn in 1980 and this property was annexed in 1993, all of the residential and bayfront. So there is no harbor line map. If you were to draw it today, you would have two choices. You could put it 75 feet or outboard of any previously existing pier that was more than 75 feet, or you could put it out to -6 if the opposite shoreline is more than 1,500 feet. And the fetch shore is like 8 miles. So to get to -6, you have to go well over 1,000 feet, which is impractical. So all of the piers on Bayfront are 75 feet long.
Thank you. That clarifies it for me. Any comments, questions of my fellow port wardens?
Yeah, I have a question. It appears, I mean, the lateral lines are drawn on here, but it's not possible to determine how they were constructed in terms of, but particularly on the right-hand side, we can't even see the end of the adjacent property. Now, I'm assuming, looking at the property, it looks like very likely that the new construction falls within the lateral lines. But it'd be great if you could provide before the next meeting, something that shows the right-hand lateral line, the property that would be used. You have to connect the line where they intersect with the water.
Yeah.
That would support that lateral line that you have on the drawing.
Well, there should be in your packages an aerial on which I drew the lateral lines that shows the adjacent property on the right.
Do the lateral lines follow, like if you're looking at a satellite image, the jetties? Because there's a sequence of jetties that look like they delineate property if you look at it on a satellite. A good picture. Unfortunately, the picture submitted is a little difficult to see where the jetties are.
The jetties are on the property line extended for the most part.
Okay. All right, yeah, because they're pretty clear. I mean, John, if you open up Google Earth.
Well, I see now that you mentioned that didn't look at the aerial. I see that on the aerial you've drawn them in, so that makes sense. That helps. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I close the record for public testimony. We'll keep the record open for written testimony until next month, where we'll consider whether or not to approve this application. Frank, nice to see you and thank you very much.
Good to see you all.
The next, and I think the final application is the Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating, CRAB. And that will be Mr. Bollinger, our course. Carl Course, I see. Mr. Bollinger.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
We'll wait for Mr. Oh, there you go. All right. Mr. Bollinger, Mr. Course, will you raise your right hand, swear to tell the port wardens the truth to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you very much. And who is going to present the application?
I'll present the application and then depending on what questions you have, either I will respond or Mr. Bollinger will.
Thank you.
The property is at 7040 Bemby Beach Road. It was formerly the Port Williams property. It is now owned by the city of Annapolis to be leased to CRAB. And we are proposing to remove and dispose of all elements of the existing fixed timber pier complex that contains, or used to contain, 37 berths. The project proposes to construct an 8-foot wide, we don't know at the moment whether it's timber deck or PVC deck, or we're finalizing the deck, but floating pier complex that will have 15 berths, including 3 boat lifts. The project will include a 35-foot by 6-foot wide gangway ramp that will transition from the fixed bulkhead to the floating pier, such that the floating pier follows the rules of having 18 inches of clearance between its bottom and the mean low water, or between the ground and its bottom at mean low water. And all the pilings installed to support or contain the timber floating pier will be internal to the 8 feet width dimension and will stand 9 feet above the deck. You have the exhibits, and I have those on my screen as well if you have any questions and want me to share. Oh, I should also say I have pictures as well of the 2 signs that were posted on January 14th, and the letters, notification letters went out that same day.
I have no questions. John, do you look like you have a question?
I have a couple questions. What's the distance, unless I'm missing it, it's from the outermost tee, where it's closest to the harbor line, what's that setback?
8 feet. Distance from the center line, and it's a provisional harbor line there. A distance from the center line of the harbor line to that edge, that closest edge is 8 feet.
Well, the crab boats wouldn't, they'll be docking boats out along the outer part of that T head, maybe not storing them permanently, I guess, anyway. Is that right? I don't know.
The boats, John, will be loading and unloading on the T head predominantly. Our boats have to be docked parallel to the dock. That's why you don't see any slips inside that inverted C. And then when we, that's where they'll be protected too from a northeast wind inside there. But the loading and unloading of guests would take place on the T head to make it as quick as possible.
And none of those boats would, even if they were there on a more permanent basis, they wouldn't extend that beyond the 8 feet into the harbor line anyway. So.
The beam on a 22-footer is 8 feet.
And then the other question I have for you, Mr. Corus, is you've got very clear delineation of the lateral lines, and I can see from the where you've overlaid the new construction with the existing, it kind of sits in the footprint. The outer T is a little bit bigger. It'd be great to see the reference points for how those lateral lines were constructed, because it's impossible for me to see from just the drawings what the reference points were to bisect the angle.
Understood. I can, I don't know how you want to do it, but I can deliver to you a comp sheet that shows the computations of those lateral lines. And that east side was a little bit problematic because obviously the adjacent property on the east side is a very large property. So the property line really doesn't come into effect. So you use the circle method, and that shoreline just to the west is kind of eroding and sort of cupped in. So I erred on the side of caution when attaching the line segments, which resulted in a few of the existing mooring piles being in the lateral line. It could just as easily sort of moved a degree or so and not been in, but I wanted to err on the side of caution. So tell me how you would like that delivered to you all, and I can make that available.
Carl, send everything through me, Kevin's got, and I will forward everything to the board. So everything goes through me.
I will say, even though Kevin's not received it, 2 letters of support have been written, one by the Williams family that owns the property to the west, supporting the new marina, and the homeowners behind the property, Ann Weathersby, has written a letter in support of the project as well.
Super, that's great.
Can we include those?
Both of those letters will be forwarded to the board for the next meeting. I have received those. So I'll definitely get them before the next meeting.
We'll accept those into the record.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from board members or questions? We will also accept the lateral line submission that is forthcoming into the record. With that, we will close the public testimony, and we will consider this for any further written testimony and whether to approve this or not at the next meeting. And gentlemen, Mr. Corse, Mr. Bollinger, we appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further business to come before the Port Wardens, or Carrie or Kevin? Do you have any other comment that we ought to consider?
Well, what was decided about for next month for the possible closed session for training or
what we have to take, someone has to take the course before that, and I think I've signed up for it, but I think it's in a couple of weeks, so we probably will not be prepared to have that for the next session, but I will let you know.
Okay, you just let me know and I'll throw it on the agenda, March or whenever.
I'm sorry, Carrie asked me that earlier, and I just have to wait and see, when I take those courses, and if it's before then we can have the closed session next month. That having been said, I'd like to express my appreciation for all the staff that's helped us and my fellow port wardens, and wish you a good evening, and we're hereby adjourned.
Okay, Gene, have a good one.
Thank you very much. You
Bye,
too.
everybody.
John, have a